Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Start Small, Think Big podcast brought to you by Digital Meld. My name is Brad Groux, founder and CEO of Digital Meld.
And I'm Robert Groux, founder and CTO of Digital Meld.
And I'm Carrie Hundley, Chief Growth Officer at Digital Meld.
And today's episode is kind of a tough subject to get through. It's ethics, privacy, and responsible AI. What every leader needs to know. Ethics and AI is something that's a vast topic. We're not going to be able to cover that in a single podcast. We kind of touch base on it every podcast we have, but I think today we'll just give a good understanding of the discussions that are hot topics right now within the ethics space, where training data is coming from, those sorts of things. So we'll just dive into the news really quickly to get things started. Robert, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is kind of a follow-up I read earlier this week about the 23andMe bankruptcy and all of that. It looks like that's kind of come to fruition. I think it happened this week, so it timed out perfectly with this whole privacy ethics, concern with AI and data. So they were once valued at $6 billion, and essentially all of their data has been acquired by a biotech company for $256 million. So there's a good Wall Street Journal article. You can read about that, just an update on a story I know we covered very, very early on, and just, goes to show that the data you give to companies and the data you give to other places is so valuable. And just because it's used ethically today doesn't mean it's going to be used ethically tomorrow. So just something to think about.
That is interesting, and I'm sure we'll touch on it further in the episode, but I just want to point out, obviously there is a responsibility by governing bodies, by oversight boards, by also companies to act ethically and to do the right thing. But there's also increasingly a really big responsibility of the user to be aware of what you're signing up for. I mean, something as simple as the Temu app, they're taking a lot of more data than you think that they are. And as a person who lives in the 21st century in 2025 in the era and age of AI, I would say that we can't just expect that there's not going to be any of that in all of the different ways that we engage with technology. So I think that there is also responsibility on the user.
Yeah, and the key thing about AI is it's trained on data, and it just needs as much data as it can get. OpenAI is ChatGPT and the leader it is today because for years, OpenAI scraped the open web. They scraped literally everything they could get their hands on, and including copyrighted materials, including private materials. And the ethics of that is up for debate and will probably be decided in a courtroom. But just keep that in mind that, everything you share, and I'm someone who's shared my whole life online because I've been single with no wife, no kids, nothing to really fear about. I've always used my own personal name. Most people expect some sort of privacy, even whenever they're using an online tool. And so there's a reason those terms and agreements are 56 pages long, because they know they're not going to read them. Yeah, just know that your data is power for these companies, and they're making billions and billions of dollars off of all of our data and the aggregate data of society as a whole. We were kind of worried whenever we talked about this a couple of episodes ago that could this be scooped up by a nefarious company or a company that doesn't follow the same sort of standards as like 23andMe. It is another biotech company that has like HIPAA compliance and things, so hopefully your data is safe. It's 23andMe, but I did want to note that they also are giving people the ability to say, I want to delete my data. So if you're a 23andMe customer and you don't want your data being transferred to this other company, you can log in and say, delete my data. And they should be held accountable for that and delete it for you.
To add on to what Carrie said, I think at least for like my inner circle, a lot of people are starting to realize that. That's why you're seeing a lot of younger families, and that's the crowd that me and my wife are hanging out. We got 3 young kids, where I feel like 5, 6, 7 years ago, everybody was putting everything on social media, whether it was videos, photos, what they're doing that day. And that's kind of changing right now. So I think the layman, the truly non-technical person, right? They see this now, and so it's a good thing that people understand that. They understand the risks. It's a calculated risk. Some people don't mind. I'm kind of in the middle between privacy and convenience, right? And you kind of have to pick and choose those battles. But it's fascinating because it's a cultural discussion. It's a technology discussion. We'll figure all this out as we go, as we like to say.
I think in the meantime too, though, being sensitive, especially to the people that you care about, like their preferences. There might be some folks that are totally fine with putting pictures of their kids all over social media, and quite frankly, that's their business and their decision. But if someone feels strongly about not doing that, then I think that we need to be sensitive to that in general, right? And so nowadays it's almost impossible to know all the times that a photo's being taken of you or your family, and just uploaded all over God's green earth. And when you have being able to mimic your child's voice and call and say that they're, been abducted and they need all this money or bad things are going to happen. I've heard experts saying you need to have a safe word, a special safe word that no one else would know but your child, because AI can't think through that, right? But again, just being gentle. Like, people are working through this at different paces and in different stages in their life. And I think that we have to, as human beings who hopefully care about the people that we're around, be sensitive and open to people's perspectives. So something I wanted to share with you all is kind of updates on the EU AI Act. So I'll give just a quick kind of breakdown of the recent developments so that everyone can get up to speed. But, in early February of this year, the first set of banned AI practices like social scoring and manipulative AI became enforceable. In May 2025, the EU released a code of practice for general purpose AI tools with guidance on transparency, risk, and copyright. On August 2nd of 2026, most of the main requirements for high-risk AI systems will take effect, including documentation, oversight, and registration rules. The EU is also emphasizing energy-efficient AI and raising concerns about how AI tools use copyrighted content, signaling a push for more responsible AI use across industries. So now that we're up to speed, a real world example is a financial services provider uses AI enhanced OCR, which is optical character recognition. So anytime you're scanning anything with text as a picture, right, and AI is picking up what's on the page, that's optics and character being the text recognition, to process scanned contracts, invoices, and compliance documents. The system uses natural language processing to extract key clauses and flag potential compliance risks automatically. This kind of AI falls into a high-risk category under the Act due to its use in financial decision-making and legal compliance. It also must meet transparency rules, meaning that users need to be aware that AI is reviewing and interpreting their documents. I like that a lot. Without proper oversight and documentation, the organization risks significant fines for non-compliance. It's nice to see some steps in the right direction, and it's nice to know that there are other countries and groups of countries that are concerned about this, because let's be honest, one of the big, not even really elephants in the room, is not all countries are going to uphold and care about standards and ethics and things like that. So I think that the more impact that the ones that do can make and band together and really, regardless of other maybe differences, try to uphold that and make as much impact as possible is really critical when you have other countries that are going to absolutely refuse any sort of guardrails and lean into the more nefarious practices.
No, I think that's important. The EU, obviously, we've talked about it before, the enforcing standardizations on hardware and consumer electronics and things like that. They've been kind of at the forefront of that. I think their case is important for the arguments of AI and how we improve and how we grow. Again, I think there's always going to be a good balance. I think we're going to talk about that balance a lot during this ethics talk. What's the risk versus reward?
It's a tough question. That's why this topic is so interesting, because would you rather be better at something or more secure, whether it's your employees or customers trust you more, right? Because that's really what this boils down to. Arguably the reason why, for example, Apple's Siri product is so terrible is because it is so secure compared to the Google Voice or whatever. It works amazing and it has zero flaws, right? And so it's that argument. And for me, if Apple put out an LLM, I'd be more likely to put in more personal data into that specific LLM, knowing Apple's ethos and knowing how they market their company and their business. I think there's going to be a market for both sides of it, like there's always been. It just goes to show there's so much to think about, and it's like I don't even know where I sit on this argument, right? It comes and goes depending on the product.
And that kind of gets us into the next kind of segue into the use of AI and automation and things for military use cases. I went to a drone event here in Houston last night with the Consul General of Ukraine, and there was a great representation of the drone companies who are building drones within Ukraine to help defend themselves from, the aggressors that is Russia. It all coincides with the fact that, like, over the last week or so, Anduril, founded by Palmer Luckey, that's the person who created Oculus, who went to work for Meta once it was acquired. Meta is Facebook, if you're not sure who that is. But it's basically the new technology startup in the defense industry. And they do things vastly differently than the military industrial complex is normally used to. But they're putting AI into all of their products. And Palmer Luckey wears Hawaiian shirts and flip-flops and shorts, and he's in his late 20s. He was a billionaire by the time he was like 19. So this is just an eccentric guy that has some wild and zany ideas is. And it's like we're in this new arms race with China specifically, but also Russia and Iran and North Korea. There's just a large threat vector, and we can't build ships fast enough. We can't build hardware fast enough. So how do you augment that? You augment that with AI and the use of AI. But again, that's such a complex topic to even discuss. Autonomy from a perspective of like taking lives or saving lives. It's just, again, nothing we're going to wrap up in today. But even Microsoft had to release a statement in the last week because they've been supporting Israel with Microsoft Azure, their cloud, and AI services, and their fight, either fight against Hamas. And so there's been an uproar about that. And so all of these companies are kind of like, what do we do? Do we help defend? Israel is an ally of the United States, or do we not just get involved at all? And if we don't, someone else is going to, and it's generally going to be a nefarious company like Alibaba in China. And so like Alibaba, actually, Apple's in kind of hot water because they're signed an AI deal with Alibaba, who's based in China. So it's such a complex topic. And I'm not sure how we're going to unwrap this within this next hour as we go down it. But the good news is we're going to focus on things from AI ethics from a business perspective as we wind up the news within a few minutes. But just the same sort of like complex discussions that these people were having at the geopolitical level, you have to have internally within your organization too. If you have to work with your legal team, you have to work with your vice presidents, you have to work with the boots on the ground and say, does this ethically make sense for us to use? Like, does replacing a person with automation make sense? Is it just for the bottom line, or are we actually improving our services? Because if you're not improving your services, then you probably shouldn't do it.
Yeah, that was a really great event last night. It was wonderful to see how many people and what a diverse group of folks was there. I mean, I think there were more people, standing in the standing room than there were even seats, which says a lot from various parts of the world, their takes on their contribution. But I was speaking with two young ladies who work for one of the drone companies in Ukraine. And, they were talking about how in addition to $1,000 drone taking out a $250,000 whatever type of aerial weapon, there are a variety of them, but that also they were used in those early days to help deliver fresh drinking water to folks who were stranded on rooftops and things like that. And so I think there's not going to ever be a perfect answer to this, but the more that we can be also trying to seek as much of a win-win or a mutually symbiotic or bring some good additional benefit, right, to start outweighing some of the negative. And again, there's no science. It's a very complicated topic, but imagine the drones using AI to seek out what they need to destroy as targets that are threats. Maybe they can use AI to scan those rooftops and see like who looks like they need the water fastest. Like there's someone who's passed out, right? Or just look for signs to say, obviously everyone needs the water, but a way to kind of help triage or drop, hey, this rooftop needs water and medical supplies, things like that. It'll be neat to see how they blend that in for additional benefits on top of what's already there.
The event yesterday was great because they were looking for uses outside of military. They're like, unfortunately we had to build them for military uses, but we want to use them for agriculture. We want to use them for industrial. Basically was like they were trying to find American partners to commercialize most of these tools that they had to do in the defense space. And like I think a lot of that's going to happen from the AI space, right? Like you're going to, if you train a model or you use a tool set, you're going to look for multiple ways to use that. And hopefully, the warfare aspect is not something that I want to really focus on. This week, there was also a ton of news within the technology space. Microsoft had big announcements this week. Google had big announcements this week. We couldn't possibly cover all of those. In our newsletter on Monday, I'll have a collection of links of all the major updates. But as an example, xAI's Grok is now on Microsoft Azure. So Elon Musk's xAI, which is part, the Twitter family, I will always call it Twitter, their Grok model, which is actually pretty good. I use it daily to kind of like counterbalance the other ones that I use. It's doing really, really well. Also, Microsoft offers their Microsoft 365 Copilot APIs now. This is a huge one for us because we love Microsoft 365 Copilot, but now we can access things through the APIs. As an example, we get the meeting summaries, right? So we record our meetings, we get our meeting summaries. Now we can like use the API to automatically ingest those meeting summaries into our CRM, which is HubSpot. And so that's something we're excitedly going to look into as soon as we get access to that API. And then they announced a Microsoft Discovery, which is a new complete R&D platform. So you PhDs out there, they're trying to make it easier. Azure Machine Learning Studios still, we work with that quite frequently, and it's still not extremely user-friendly, especially for researchers who aren't technically savvy. So there's just more and more stuff is being announced every single day. And the biggest one, I think, is Microsoft has open sourced their GitHub Copilot. And so their GitHub Copilot is their AI agent for their coding platform, which is built into Microsoft Visual Studio Code, which is now going to be built into GitHub. And this brings us back to a conversation we had last week with ethics, Robert. If they open source this software and they laid off 6,000 people, many of them coders last week, they're hoping, obviously, that the community as a whole will be filling in the void of some of those people that they laid off.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. I was actually at an event today where we touched on the layoffs that Microsoft had that we talked about. And if you look at where Microsoft is going and where their market is going, and I don't have it all prepped, but there's a pie chart of where their current revenue is. And the AI space right now is not, they're looping this into other revenue points where it's not actually full fact. So they're saying they have 70% growth in certain things, but the reality is, well, this was just like an add-on to a certain license subscription. And so it's interesting. That was interesting. I wouldn't have thought that off the top of my head. I mean, I don't dive deep into revenue and see where Microsoft's making more money, but like they're making more money on Xbox than some of the AI products that they're saying right now. So at least as of this was like at the end of Q4 of 2024, I think at the numbers we had. So that could have gone up, but our Microsoft's going all AI. I mean, I think somebody said at that event, like it's a burn the boat situation. Like the Vikings used to say, like when all else fails, burn the boats. Like we're going all in. We're not backing up. We're forgetting everything we thought we knew, everything we've built, and we're going all in on this. And so it was an interesting take. Not sure if I fully agree with it, but it's an AI world now, whether you like it or not, because that's what all these larger companies are doing, and everybody's just going to follow suit because it's a copycat world sometimes.
When you have the top 5 companies in the world, not just the United States, but in the world, all going full in on AI, and so the businesses are going to follow, because again, Microsoft services 90% of Fortune 500 companies, and they service probably about 90% of most medium and larger businesses. That's just the way it is. And so if they're moving that way and you're using those products and services, they know it's so hard for you to leave those services, right? You know how hard it is like to leave the Apple ecosystem. Exponentially harder to leave that from an enterprise perspective, where you have tens of millions of data points and thousands of employees. If they're moving all in on AI, they're going to drag you kicking and screaming, basically, because again, they see the numbers that their revenue is going to increase exponentially because they're able to gather more data and do more things, and so yeah, just join the ride. Okay, finally, I think we have one more fun little story. I'll share the screenshot of this on our newsletter on Monday. But AI, while you could be all in on AI, you should still give pause to it as well and double check and recheck things. One of the most popular AI detectors, it has a 99.99% accuracy that the Declaration of Independence, written by our founding fathers, is generated by AI. I thought that was pretty amusing. I saw that over the weekend, and this has been going on for several years, but they still to this day think that it's generated by AI.
That is funny.
Human in the loop, and that's why you can't trust everything you see.
Yeah,
that's an obvious
we
one.
Need to keep that.
But some of them aren't obvious. That's the point. I think a lot of people miss that. They like obviously that wasn't written by AI, but how many things are you shoving in there that isn't, but you're being told it is, and so you're making that assumption. So yeah, it's funny.
Yep. So now I think we get down to the base conversation of today. Again, we're going to try to provide some guidance and some information regarding like AI and ethics from your business perspective, right? Like as you're building out things for your business, does it make sense? What kind of things you need to keep in mind? All those sorts of things. And the first thing we're going to talk about is like bias in AI algorithms. And we've kind of even broached this subject, I think, last episode or the episode before with ChatGPT 4.0, that's 4 in the letter O. Basically, they had done some internal testing with it and prompt engineering and trying it internally, but the testers were using their internal knowledge of how the LLM was written and trained to test it. And so whenever they actually sent it out to the masses and the masses were using it without that additional context, like things went really, really haywire. And then they had to go back, they had to roll back one of their changes because of that. And it's because it's bias, right? So we all have our inherent biases. We just do. And so with AI, bias is one of the worst things you can do. You have to try to do everything from a neutral stance, right? And we won't get to the machine learning and data science part of that. Anybody who's taken a statistics class knows a little bit about those biases and things. Last week, Carrie broached a subject about the AI and hiring and how that's pretty terrible, at least in the hiring process, as in the interview process, the reviews, scanning process. Carrie, do you want to touch base on some additional thoughts regarding that?
Yeah, I just think, there's certain elements of life and interpersonal assessment, if you will. Humans can't replicate humans. There's no way that technology can, right? We have a lot of wonderful attributes as human beings with dynamic minds, but we also are irrational and unpredictable and all the things. We surprise ourselves and one another in great ways and in terrible ways. I don't claim to be a math genius, but there's no algorithm that can solve for that. And again, as Brad has mentioned and Robert have spoken to on several other episodes for different reasons, there are use cases where it's okay to have a lower margin of certainty or accuracy, and there's times where it's not. And when you're talking about something that is so convoluted to begin with, so hard to predict in general, arguably the candidate themselves doesn't always know how they're going to perform. The same when we talk about the justice system, things like that. Like, it's so insane to me to think that the jobs are too difficult to do to make the assessment as best as possible, that we're just going to let AI do that when it has a long-standing impact on the organization who's either gaining or missing out on this candidate, and then the impact to the lives of the people that are involved, right? So I would just advocate that in hiring, maybe to glean overall insights that can be used as a generalization, but when it comes to assessing or interacting with a specific individual, you have to take a different approach, right? Is the reason that categorization and stereotyping exists. It's a way for folks to start to take the world at large and break down data into meaningful buckets that then you can do something with. But it doesn't stop there. The closer you get to the subject at hand, the more you need to exercise mental agility and discernment. I don't know. It scares me that people think that certain aspects of life are okay to turn over to AI, especially in its infancy, but even as it progresses, honestly.
And you can kind of take the ethics in another place too. Like, let's talk company numbers, right? Like, if you have an executive, and this is something everybody wants now, is, hey, I want an LLM chatbot that I can talk to understand my revenue and how many products I'm selling, or how many products and SKUs are we selling here at this store versus another store. If you have that chatbot and it outputs incorrect data, like, to me, that's an ethics problem as well, because you have to be able to explain to the end user how it's coming, and you need to explain to them how it's coming up with this answer. And a lot of products aren't, I can tell you right now, a lot of the off-the-shelf products aren't doing that. So it'll just give you the answer. It doesn't provide you any context on how it got to that answer. So I was prepping for this, kind of going through some of the things that small businesses and even enterprises should care about, is the transparency on what's being done. So if you're buying an AI tool or products, think of it outside of company numbers or financials. Think about, there's tons of products that do meeting recordings. Any AI product, these are the questions I think you should be asking. Can you understand how decisions are made if they are made? Are AI models producing discriminatory or unfair results? That's what Carrie and Brad were just talking about. Who is responsible if the AI makes a mistake? So somebody on your team has to be accountable if something's not accurate, right? Because then it needs to get fixed, and you need to know who to go to. And then, how is the personal and customer data handled? I think that's the big thing, especially if you're in the EU. We talked about the EU. Data privacy for us over in the States isn't that big of a deal. But if personal or customer data is getting leaked, such as salary information, I mean, that has all kind. It might not entail legal troubles, but it definitely is going to entail cultural issues around your business, right? And so those are the questions. If you're going to be implementing any off-the-shelf tool, those are questions I would definitely ask if I was, IT director, or even take yourself out of the IT role, just any business owner or business leader.
Bias in AI just isn't just a technical flaw. As Robert was kind of just saying, it's a business and ethical risk, right? Like, if your algorithm is trained on biased data, it'll amplify that inequality, which basically just erodes trust and then leads to real world harm. If you're basing your quarterly decisions or yearly budgeting on flawed financial data that's coming from an LLM that's trained on flawed data, because maybe you only looked at your 10 most profitable projects, you're not getting a holistic view of like all of your projects as a whole, and you're just cherry picking data sets because that's, that makes your leadership team look better, then it's going to lead to really, really bad results. And so that's just something to keep in mind, that people have cherry picked data for like their presentations and leadership meetings for decades. If you're doing that with AI doesn't have that discernment. Like as Carrie said, it can't predict like how we would do that and be like, I know I fudged that number a little bit. I'll remember that down the line. Like AI, if you feed those numbers in AI, it's just going to know. It's just going to use them however it can. And so it's essential for building responsible, reliable, and inclusive AI systems. It's like you have to remove bias completely, or at least do your best to do it. But Robert brought up a great point. There should be an escalation path of when things go wrong. Ownership is really hard to define in these larger organizations. A lot of middle management specifically, again, I've been there before, like we operate in this gray area. It's like, nobody sees me. I'm not actually here. Like you kind of operate under the radar. But with these systems, you need to clearly define as part of when going through your discovery process and everything, who's going to own this? If there are issues with this, what's the escalation path? Just like you would from a disaster recovery scenario with a new system you bring on board. If you spend $500,000 to bring on a new CRM, you're going to have like an escalation path of when that's down. Who do I contact? What's our escalation path? What's our SLAs? What's that same sort of like processes need to be developed about AI as well. So we talked about transparency and bias, and then we've kind of broached the subject on privacy and trust a little bit. But Carrie, can you just expand a little bit on how privacy is basically the foundation of trust?
Yeah, I mean, the ability to understand and decide what information of yours is being shared when, with whom, for what reason, with what context, used for what reason, and who else is going to impact. Those are decisions that we probably aren't consciously making all the time when we decide to share information, but I guarantee you the brain wheels are turning, and whether it's at a subconscious level or it's happening consciously, but just so quickly we don't really stop and grab hold of some of those little nuances as to whether we decide who, what, and when, where we want to share information. Taking that away from you is taking away a lot of agency for yourself, and that's never a good thing, right? I mean, the same with why being honest is so important, because when you don't give someone all the facts, you're taking away their agency to make a decision based on the whole truth, right? And so sharing of information without that consideration is 100% in the same ballpark. And there are situations where your data being shared is not that big of a deal, and where it is, but you also don't know nowadays where your data is going today may not be a big deal, but what's the transference of that, right? Companies buy data, especially now with LLMs, how are they trained on lots and lots of data? They have to get that from somewhere. And I think that companies are going to get increasingly, especially the ones who need to purchase this data, they're going to get increasingly creative and also increasingly opening the pocketbooks up to glean this data, right? I mean, for instance, I was talking to a guy maybe last year who was trying to use AI data to train for dentists to help better predict if we go this treatment path, it's more than likely going to result in this. And so helping people weigh the cost benefit and the likelihood of something bad happening. Well, that's great if that's what it's being used for. But if then that company goes under and they sell all that data to someone else, and now instead they're using a different part of your data set, like your ethnicity or your income, or I mean, who knows? There's just no way to know how this information is going to snowball and be used down the road. But additionally, we should be able to decide what is shared. The same as talking about taking photos of people and posting them against their will. I think it just really all comes down to agency, and that's a big topic.
It's funny when you mentioned this privacy aspect of it, and Carrie, you kind of like teed it up perfectly for me, and I wasn't even going to bring this up because I had just forgotten about it because there's been so much in the news. Not protecting your users' privacy can come back to bite you in more ways than just like the embarrassment of it doing that. That happened to Reddit last month. I've been a member of Reddit since like 2006. It's just a news aggregation site that it's all user fed. So the users submit a story and people upvote it or downvote it. And, ones that are more popular are seen on the front page, but then there's little subreddits which are just groups. Like I follow the Houston Astros. There's a Houston Astros subreddit, and there's one for AI. There's one for ChatGPT. There's a community. They're just little communities that are about specific topics. And like the people who use Reddit really, really, really love Reddit. Like Reddit's gone public recently, and so there's been a lot of changes from the data privacy perspective, and they started selling their data. Their users' data, our comment history, the number of stories we submitted, how we upvoted, all that type of metrics and data. But now they're selling that because they went public, and now they have to, return those profits to investors. And so some researchers out of the University of Zurich scraped Reddit and then also use data from outside sources and infiltrated with AI bots into these really like passionate communities, these smaller passionate communities, and basically became some of the most popular people within those communities. And so 1,000 different bots were created over time, and this included one of them identified as a rape victim, one is a black man who opposes the Black Lives Matter movement. This is all happening on X or Twitter or whatever, all these other social medias too. Like we have to just keep that in mind. But it's come Reddit created this monster. You've created this monster. Like it's biting the hand that feeds it. So just keep that in mind. Like this could really, really blow up in your face if you don't lay that foundation. And so part of getting your data where it needs to be, like you need to have a data like privacy and ethics outlines, right? You need to have, that's all part of the process. This should happen whether you implement AI or not. Just be very clear about that. Like data privacy is important beyond just AI. Like Robert, I know you kind of touched base on transparency to begin with, but we always say it all the time. We're really honest as a company, maybe too honest sometimes. To a fault. We show people behind the curtain a little bit too much. But can you just touch base on why, especially in this age of AI, why transparency is more important than ever? As an example, like an example is whenever we talk to folks, whenever we have a meeting with them, like you mind if we record the session for our AI, saying those basic sort of things, letting them know that they're training on that data, the importance of that across the board.
I'm glad you said that, because that was going to be the first one I was going to bring up. Just something as simple as recording meetings, like the issues that certain organizations or certain people might have around that. And so now it's like a culturally acceptable thing. Like when you walk into somebody's house, you might take your shoes off. Well, if you're going to record a meeting now, you need to just ask for permission. Even it might be a given. And so that's something that I've started doing. And for certain companies, it's something I know, hey, I'm not going to record this meeting because I know these guys, like they're not all about that, right? And then there's certain discussions that are going to be happening in meetings that you don't want recorded, even if you know you have all the processes, even if you know that you have all the security procedures in place, because there's certain discussions it's not worth the risk, right? Like if there's some type of acquisition going on or an HR matter. So I think having that transparency and being open to everybody, and for us and for platforms that use AI, it's saying, hey, here's what our product does, and here's like what it can't do. Right. And I'll say ChatGPT and all these other guys, like they're doing that somewhat. If you go to ChatGPT right now, it says, hey, it can make mistakes, and OpenAI doesn't use, your data to train, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's a good start. And I go back to that last example that I gave. But if you have an LLM and you get a result, don't just take that result and treat that as fact. Have it describe to you how it got to that point, because most of the time it won't. Sometimes it will. I think 4.0 is pretty good about explaining how it got to an answer. Sometimes annoyingly, right? Because you just want the answer to something, because it's not anything that can be taken out of context or anything that's a big deal. And so just realize, I find this in myself, where if I'm chatting with the chatbot or LLM, whatever you want to call it, I almost think of it as a human, so I don't want to just keep prompting it questions. But no, if you got an answer and you're like, that doesn't seem right because some number sticks off, or a little bit about the subject, have it explain to you how it got to that point. And that's how you're going to figure out the hallucinations. I think most people don't realize most of these LLMs, especially 4.0 recently, we talked about this a couple of weeks back, it's hallucinating all the time. So checking work and prompting it to be transparent, because most of these tools aren't inherently out of the box transparent, is so key. And also using other LLMs on the daily. I know most people don't want to do that. It's a huge workflow issue. I'm sure there's going to be somebody out there that's going to come up with a product that's going to make this way easier. And I think as AI gets cheaper and cheaper, there's going to be products that you just prompt your question and it just automatically chooses the best model for you. And I'm sure there's already products out there today, but for the average day-to-day user, people listening to this podcast, they're not going to pay for that because it's going to be too costly, I'd imagine. And so until that point, you kind of have to use these other LLMs because they're all a little bit different. If I want up-to-date news or what's going on in the world, I'm going to go to Grok. I'm not going to go to ChatGPT, because if you use the search in ChatGPT, I don't know about anybody else, it never works great for me. It's kind of the same Google problem where people have figured out how to get their website and these things. I think the big thing is just double checking the work and having, if it's not transparent, ask it to be. That's the good thing about LLMs. It'll tell you whatever you ask for.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a trust issue. I ask it every time not to hallucinate. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, but it's just become muscle memory. Because I'd rather, to me, it's less work to just type those couple extra words on the front end than it is to go back and try to dissect which part it hallucinated. I'd just rather be very clear and direct from the start, you know?
Yeah, it's when everybody started using Chat GPT 3 or 3.5, I think was when it got huge. We were all using it for just like random questions, right? Nothing really intricate. Now people are starting to use this to solve real life problems, and they're taking what they thought 3.5 was, where hey, it could do any math problem very easily and also explain the work very easily. But it can't do some basic business process, right? Or maybe ChatGPT thinks it can and it gives you an answer, but it's actually hallucinating. And so that's, again, I think people are still kind of caught in that mindset. I find myself in that mindset where you take it as fact, and then once you start digging deeper, it's like, oh wait, maybe this is a little bit different. So yeah, I think that at least for me, that's how it goes back. I just keep thinking back to the days where it was this magical tool, right? That I was like, everybody needs to be using this. And we're way past that stage now. It's a magical tool, but the problems businesses specifically are solving, it's a lot more than just a chatbot and LLM. I don't want to go down the data side. We say data all the time, but seriously, that's what we mean.
Well, it's flawed because it's trained on flawed data, right? If they scraped Reddit is full of tons of flawed data. You know what I mean? Like it's trained on flawed data. If once they opened up the LLMs to the internet, that introduces all of the flaws of the internet. And so again, we talk about like most LLMs we think are about 70-80% out of the box. And that's most, I think, solutions. And so you just need to trust it about 70-80% of the time. But you need to always have that little inkling. It's like, hey, I need to go verify this, or ask for its sources, and you go click through the source. Like that's because you like generally, if you ask for the sources, it'll give you the sources. Click through and just make sure that those sources match up. Take the 30 to 45 seconds to do that. Like, okay, this is where it got it from. Because the source that may be sourcing may be some made up crazy person, or just maybe a crazy person. I think it's really important. We've talked about basically the core tenets of ethical AI for you and your business is bias mitigation. So implement bias detection and mitigation through continuous monitoring. Like that's having these conversations internally. What are we seeing? What are we, and send out surveys from the people who use your tools. Make sure that there's nothing you're not seeing because your biases as you're testing aren't picking up what they're doing, right? And data privacy, we're outside of AI, you need to have data privacy. But specifically with AI, if you accidentally point it to your, to your HR system and it pulls in everybody's, his employment history, and someone's able to just, hey, how much does Kathy in accounting make? She makes $64,000 a year. I only make 32. You just know that you need to put up those guardrails before you roll out those solutions to that. And then just transparency. Whenever you make mistakes, be transparent about that. Because how do you learn from them? You have to be transparent about it. But be transparent about where the data comes from and how you train the data, especially internally within your organization. That's your internal IP anyway. So you probably have non-disclosure agreements with most of your employees and things. So what harm really is there? And again, we talk about it all the time, but the people who know the most about the business are the boots on the ground who are doing the work. The technology teams implementing these tools don't know the most about a business. They're assuming they know the best way to roll out an LLM for an accounting group because they probably asked ChatGPT how to do it. So just know that you need to also bring those people into the loop. And so again, bias mitigation, data privacy, and transparency.
I was going to double click on that Reddit topic because a lot of people are saying like, why is Reddit bad data? Like where we're coming from with that is Reddit has a certain demographic of user, typically more technical people, younger people. I believe it's majority male audience. And so that means the content that's in that data set is geared towards that. And so if you're trying to solve a problem that I would say like a female issue, if it's a female product, a marketed product, like you're not going to want to train on Reddit's data. The majority of the data is male, right? I mean, that's kind of like the mindset of when we say data is bad, you kind of have to think outside of the box. The data itself is fine, but the full context of the data, knowing that it's a specific demographic of age, sexual orientation, all of those things. So try to, think outside the box there when you're trying to choose data sets and think about all those things because again, it's missed quite often.
The wheels are really turning over here, Robert. I have so many comments on that. In agreement that I don't know where to start. So instead, I'm going to sidestep to an adjacent point. Is that also understanding the types of AI and their uses, right? So generative AI is programmed to generate things. It's not programmed to say, I'm not sure So its desire to gap fill is, I think, what causes a lot of hallucination, which in part is by design, because it is designed to generate things. Versus, it's going to be really interesting to see how agents, how the differences in hallucinations, possibly in agentic AI, because they're more task oriented. So is there going to be less hallucination because its purpose is different? I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but it's something I think to keep top of mind when you're using various types of. It's a lot of people just lump AI all together like it's one big, fruit salad, and it's not.
And kind of going back to the Reddit topic, so basically the subreddits within Reddit, they're echo chambers, right? So the people there aren't going to be the most neutral people on a topic. They're going to be very passionate about whatever topic that is, and there are going to be trolls in there who are like the anti whatever that is. But for the most part, they're going to be the ones that are like all in, Star Wars is the perfect example. There are the Star Wars shows like Andor that have like, they're universally loved. And then you have the ones like the Acolyte that are like, there's polar opposites. And so they're just the conversations that happen within those different subreddits are just fascinating. And just know, like, if you're pulling data from there thinking you're going to get anything realistic other than like the latest trends and things, because again, they're echo chambers, and echo chambers are not, that's biased data. That's biased by the 10th degrees. Just know that again, within your organization, getting data from a specific team and only that team, if it's going to be how that team wants it, getting data from holistically how the entire company uses that data set, I think is the best approach for that.
Like Brad was saying, there's a biasy, but there is benefits in that, right? If you're following a fitness subreddit, and if you're building some fitness app and you want to collect the data there, so there's a pro and a con to it. And so again, you gotta overthink it and overanalyze it. Because if I'm building a fitness app, I mean, before LLMs, the first thing I would do, Reddit, and then what's my question? And the reason is because I know those are, this is pre AI, those were real people. So I knew these were real people answering the question, or real reviews, or whatever it is. It wasn't just some marketing blog that was out there writing some SEO friendly blog post. There is value in the data set. It's just, how do you use it? What are you slicing and dicing? What are you taking it from? And going from there.
The core tenets are the bias mitigation, data privacy, and transparency. And then adding all those up gives you the risk of ignoring ethical AI.
Just to recap, the risks of ignoring ethical AI: businesses that fail to prioritize ethical AI risk regulatory fines, class action lawsuits, customer churn, long-term brand damage, and all the things associated with those items. As public awareness and scrutiny increase, which they will, lack of transparency or bias in systems can trigger significant backlash. There's a reason why quote unquote goodwill is a line item on evaluation of a company, and you can tank that so quickly and irrevocably in a lot of ways. But this is the Wild West, and that's certainly a risk that you run. You don't want to undo your blood, sweat, and tears because you chose the wrong tool and didn't vet it and didn't look into it, right? So additionally, failing to meet ever evolving compliance standards can slow down go-to-market timelines, jeopardize deals, harm investor confidence. All right, so it's all the things that you work to bolster in a business, and the culture that you create, and the relationships that you foster. Unfortunately, it doesn't take much these days to tank that if you're not careful.
So we've talked about the core tenets of what makes ethical AI. Now we can talk about the enablers of responsible AI. So Robert, do you want to just touch base on establishing cross-functional ethics committees? And
I think the big thing is we talk about this all the time, having a group of champions meeting. I think in those meetings, and you don't even have to have technical people, it could be just in your leadership meeting. I feel like every organization at this point, if they're not doing it, they should be doing it, is talking AI, talking about the ethics of AI, making sure that what they're doing is solving a real problem, not using biased data, and explaining how they're getting to answers. That's the key thing. That's going to get you the fundamental success that you look for. It's a key thing, just like developing and implementing new tools. Ethics should also be top of mind, especially if you're any type of organization that handles PII, personal identifiable information. And most companies today, when I ask them if they have that, they all say no. And 99% of the time they're wrong, because they have an HR team that has to save I-9 files, which is the government file that's basically required for employment, that has social security numbers. A lot of them save driver's licenses And they're doing this without anybody really knowing, and it's not their fault. It's not their fault. They've been given no guidance, and it's on leadership, it's on IT to call that out and fix it, not chastise or blame that group, right? It's to help them. Hey, look, instead of saving it here, we have this certain area where it has the correct labeling, and so AI isn't going there and touching it, or our product isn't going there and touching it. So
Yeah, and how are you going to get cross-functional committees, alignment, and commitment from the top to really look at and prioritize ethical AI? You know, the analogy that it comes to mind for me is just because you may not ever have a fire doesn't mean it's okay to not have a agreed upon muster point and exit plan and fire extinguishers in the building. Hopefully you never need them, but if everyone's going in different directions when the fire alarm goes off, or if they haven't been trained or there's not the proper safety equipment in place, like that's extremely irresponsible. And I think that, you know, the analogy applies here as well.
No, it's so true. I quote it all the time, but Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. You know, those types of leadership is what you need within these there's high risk times. It just is. Like you're going to make decisions to keep pace with your competitors because of how fast the technology is moving. But if you set the foundations and frameworks early and you check on it often, so you have those clear lines of communications, people should be able to escalate directly to the top if they see something wrong, and they should do that without fear of recourse. All of those things that people talk about what make a great organization, you need to implement those, because it's going to get more and more important, because the world's just going to get moving faster and faster and faster. We talked about last week that the easy jobs are getting automated, the hard jobs are getting easy, and the impossible jobs are getting hard. And whenever people are solving impossible tasks, there's going to be mistakes made. And they need to be able to have that open line of communication and trust to know that, hey, I swung for the fences and it didn't work out, you know? And so I think it's going to be really, really important to have that transparency and that communication. All right, so I think we've had a great discussion so far. You know, I think we can start wrapping up. And so I think we just have our little 1 or 2 minute hot takes for each of us. Carrie, you want to take us from the top?
Yeah, privacy is the new brand trust. As we've discussed here today, prioritizing privacy doesn't just comply, they win loyalty, trust, goodwill, things that are valuable both internally and externally to your organization and your business continuity.
Robert?
yeah, mine. You know, transparency turns risk into trust. We've hit on transparency a ton. So again, this is what's going to give you that extra ammo. I mean, how great is it when you have an answer to a question, you know that's going to come up? Because when you're implementing AI tools, there's questions like, hey, how do we know this is accurate? Well, if you already have this developed in a product or in an internal solution, it just gives more validity to what you're doing. So if you can be transparent and answer the question before it's even asked, let me tell you, you're going to get a lot of trust.
Oh, that's a great answer as well. My hot take is ethics isn't a feature, it's a foundation, right? Like, we all hope most people are ethical and moral people. We all hope most organizations are. Most people are just trying to solve their day-to-day problems, and they're not necessarily thinking about these long-term ramifications. But as the decisions we make, they're all data points now. You know what I mean? Businesses are capturing data left, right, up, down, everywhere. And you just need to know that data is being captured, and if that data is used, how it could be used, and could it be used for nefarious purposes? Could there be privacy leaks or trust issues? And again, like, the folks in HR don't know that, you know, they should be doing extra steps with the data privacy, and that's not really their job to know. Their job is to help the employees. It's a job of leadership. It's the job of the organization as a whole to come together and say, this is how we're going to protect our users' data. And so just know that it takes a village. We say that all the time, but it's so true with everything here. Really, I see this AI ethics really no different than the ethics that you should probably have for your data that you already have. It's how do you implement that data? The same sort of data questions could be had about automation before. It's just data. And so if you set those foundations early and you revisit them often, I think you'll come out okay. And just be self-reflective and self-critical, and just know that you're going to make mistakes, but as long as you're learning from those mistakes, that's the best case forward.
Yeah, real quick, just to hit on that, Brad, because the best thing that I've thought about is, I would say pre-2020, cybersecurity was kind of in this same ethics discussion where a lot of people were screaming that cybersecurity needs to be taken more serious, and everybody found out why, because of the Colonial Pipeline and the various ransomware attacks that have happened. And now state actors are using ransomware attacks to generate revenue. Like, people are making real money doing this, right? Same thing applies for ethics here. I think as companies grow, as AI develops, there's going to be a lot more data leaks. We didn't touch on it. There was a Coinbase leak, I think it was this week or last. As those leaks come up, people are going to start taking it more serious. And unfortunately, they're going to learn the hard way. But I mean, that's better than not learning at all. So I think as time goes on, this is going to be a lot more full-fledged. You're going to have teams in lots of companies where you wouldn't have had an ethics team before, even for smaller enterprises. Think less than 1,000 employees, but probably more than 500, 600. So I think in due time, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how all that unfolds.
Yeah, and you kind of bring up a good point. Like, just think back to Cambridge Analytica. So do you guys remember that with Facebook, right? The Cambridge Analytica scandal. Basically, Facebook inadvertently opened up all of their user data to third-party system Cambridge Analytica, which harvested it for political gain. And that was just a number of data sets from the social media side. But think of how all the data that you're capturing, if you're building an AI tool to build as a SaaS platform for people to use, think of all the extra data that you're pulling in, more than a social media and more than those things. Think of all that data for your internal company and your internal employees. If that same sort of leak happened and where you inadvertently open up an API to someone that shouldn't have it and they just literally scrape all of that data, then all your data gets ingested in these LLMs. And once it's ingested in those LLMs, it's in those LLMs. It's been trained on those LLMs. All future versions of it will have there's no taking that back. OpenAI trained ChatGPT on copyrighted data, and it's easy to prove that because you just prompt ChatGPT and it'll tell you, like, with the responses. And so just know that you can't hide from that history, and that's probably going to cost ChatGPT billions of dollars at some point. But they look at it as a rounding error based upon the skyrocketing of their business. Hopefully, you're not that type of business, and hopefully you care about what that really says about you and your organization. So just a lot of really great things to chew on. And again, we're not going to solve this problem in a day. You're not going to solve this problem in a day in your organization. This is an ongoing, never-ending process of data privacy, ethics, responsible uses, transparency with your organization, good leadership. Like, that's just it's a never-ending problem, and you just have to continue to work on it every single day. And so hopefully you do. So now I think we can kind of wrap up. On June 12th, I'm going to be presenting at the World Affairs Council of Houston, wachouston.org. We're giving an AI talk there. Hopefully you can make it if you're local to Houston. I think the tickets are about $20. The seats are limited, and they're going fast. If you have questions about that, reach out to us on our social media or LinkedIn. I will leave this in the show notes, but Digital Meld was represented on a Microsoft Reactor video this past week for agentic AI and startups. I gave about an 8-minute discussion with a gentleman named Anthony, who's a startup ambassador through the Microsoft Reactor Toronto program. So thank you to Microsoft Reactor Toronto for having us on. We may include some clips of that in a future episode, but just look for our social media, and then also I'll put a direct link to that in our show notes on Monday. So with that said, Carrie, do you want to take us away?
Yeah, I just want to say, this is our 11th episode. We're really honored to be able to do this, to be able to bring, our knowledge and expertise and the expertise of folks much smarter than us to you all. We're really humbled by the feedback that we've gotten so far, but we would really love to hear, what topics do you want us to cover, or what angles? Are there specific stories or people that we should have on the show? We'd love to highlight what's most useful, and there's so many different ways to peel this apple, if you will. So we would really love if you dropped us a comment on, one of the various mediums which you can find us, all the big platforms, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Amazon, you name it. If you want to find all those links, you can just go to our Linktree /Digital Meld and find those. We'd love to hear your feedback. And also, if you know anyone who would be a great guest, we would love to know that as well. So just thank you all for the opportunity and the feedback, and we look forward to engaging with everyone even more deeply as time goes on.
No, so our goal is to get more guests. If you go to linktree.com/digitalmeld, at the top of that is would you like to be a podcast guest? And it's a little Microsoft form you can fill out, and with some basic information. And if you would like to be a guest and share your story, your AI journey, what you're working on, those sorts of things, please feel free to fill that out. Over the last few days, I've gotten about 20 responses, so I think we're going to have guests pretty soon. As Robert says all the time, if you disagree with what we say, we really want to hear from you. Hear from people all the time disagreeing with us on the TikTok comments. Mostly disagree with us, so keep it up, TikTok. We like it. It's good discourse. So with that said, I think we can kind of wrap up for the day. And just again, we release every Friday. The newsletter's out every Monday. If you want to know anything about us and where to find us, linktree.com/digitalmeld has all of our links to both the podcast and our company and our personal LinkedIns. And so if you have any questions, please reach out. Thanks again for joining us on this journey. I can't believe it's already been 11 episodes. We're over 2 months now. We're getting tens of thousands of views a week across all platforms and methods. And so just thank you again. I'm really looking forward to this every week. Like it is a lot of work, as Robert said last week, but I can't get enough of it. Next week, the title of the episode is Shadow IT or Secret Superpower, Embracing Innovation from the Ground Up. We hope you join us next week, and we thank you for everything you've done so far. We'll look forward to that. Bye.
Until next time, folks.
We want to hear about your AI and automation journey, and we'd love for you to get involved with Start Small, Think Big. If you'd like to participate or offer feedback, please reach out to us anytime via email at contact@digitalmeld.io or use the contact form on our website, digitalmeld.io/contact. Also, please help spread the word by liking, subscribing, and sharing our podcasts on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks.